Have you ever boarded a flight, just hoping to sit down in peace, only to be asked to leave the seat you purchased, just because someone looked at you and thought you didn't belong there? That was the moment when a woman of color calmly sat down in her seat, when suddenly the pilot himself walked up to her and asked her to change seats. Not for safety reasons, not because of regulations, just because he believed she couldn't sit there. But what he didn't know was she was the owner of this plane, a billionaire woman, strong but calm, facing a choice: stay silent and let things pass, or face it so that someone understands that respect is not a privilege. If it were you, what would you choose? Are you calm enough to face prejudice as soon as it touches you? Let your heart answer and invite you to step into this emotional story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to follow stories that touch your heart. Morning light spilled softly across the glass walls of Northridge Private Terminal, stretching long golden lines across the polished floor tiles. Outside, the wind carried the dry chill typical of an early fall morning in the Midwest. Nothing about this day looked extraordinary. On the surface, it seemed to be just another morning where wealthy travelers boarded private jets, assistants rolled expensive luggage behind them, and chauffeurs waited beside black SUVs. But this morning carried a quiet shift in the air, one only a few people would notice, and only later. Walking through the sliding doors of the terminal was a woman many would have overlooked in an instant. She wasn't dressed in designer clothing. She didn't wear a watch worth more than a car. She wasn't trailed by an assistant or carrying anything that suggested wealth. Her name was Maya Carter. She wore a soft gray sweater, fitted jeans, and a pair of worn-in sneakers that had clearly traveled more miles than most luxury suitcases. A navy blue backpack hung from her shoulder, the fabric faded slightly near the seams. In her hand was a simple paper cup filled with coffee she had brewed at home that morning. Coffee far too weak for most people's taste, but exactly the way she liked it. Maya's pace was calm, steady. Her face was relaxed, though her eyes rich. Deep brown held a quiet sharpness, the kind that belonged to someone who had lived through enough storms to no longer fear thunder. She didn't stand out, and that was intentional. A man in a navy blazer waiting near the check-in counter paused when she passed by. He frowned slightly, then nudged the woman beside him. She glanced at Maya and raised her brows. "She must be lost," the man muttered. "This terminal doesn't handle commercial flights." Maya heard it. She always heard it. She gave no sign that she did. She stepped toward the small kiosk where passengers usually checked in before boarding private flights. A young employee behind the counter, barely out of college, hair neatly pinned, looked up with a polite smile that wavered when she took in Maya's appearance. "Good morning," Maya said, her voice warm but soft. "I'm here for the Carter Airjet X9 flight to Denver." The employee blinked, hesitated. Name, she asked, tapping the keyboard. "Maya Carter." A pause. Then the employee's fingers froze above the keys. "Oh, one moment, ma'am." Her tone changed, more careful, more formal, but still uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether she had misheard, as if the mere idea that this unassuming woman could be that Carter felt improbable. She checked the manifest, verified the flight, then cleared her throat. "Yes, you're on the list. Boarding is through the private corridor to your left. Enjoy your flight." Maya offered a gentle nod. "Thank you." As she walked away, she heard the employee whisper to a coworker, "She doesn't look like someone who owns anything here." Her coworker responded quietly, "Well, maybe she's just a guest." Maya didn't turn back. She'd learned long ago that correcting strangers was a waste of breath. People saw what they wanted to see, and most people rarely saw someone like her, someone with dark skin, quiet confidence, and simple clothes, and think billionaire. She reached the private corridor leading to the tarmac. Her footsteps echoed lightly along the narrow hall. Through the tall windows, She could already see the sleek silver body of the Carter Airjet X9, the morning sun glinting off its wings. She paused for a moment, letting her gaze rest on it. A strange feeling fluttered in her chest, something between pride and longing. She had built this, with her mind, her perseverance, her endless nights of wrestling with doubt and determination. This aircraft wasn't just a machine. It was one of the many symbols of how far she'd climbed from the cramped apartment in Detroit where she once slept on a mattress on the floor. But today wasn't about pride. Today was about something far quieter. A routine inspection, a surprise evaluation, a personal check on whether her company lived up to its promise of professionalism, equity, and dignity for every customer, no matter how they looked. Maya reached the aircraft stairs and climbed up slowly, savoring the faint smell of fuel and morning air. Inside, the cabin was bright and elegant cream leather seats, soft lighting, polished wood trim, everything designed with care, everything crafted to offer comfort. Only 2 passengers were already seated, a couple in their early 60s, Harold and Vivian Grant. Vivian's diamond earrings glimmered like frost. Harold's gold cufflinks caught the light as he flipped through a financial magazine. Vivian looked up first. Her eyes drifted over Maya down the sneakers, up the plain sweater, and lingered with a faint curl at the corner of her lips. Not a smile. Something closer to judgment. Harold glanced at Maya only briefly, giving no acknowledgement, as if she were an airport employee passing through. Vivian, however, whispered something under her breath, just loud enough for Harold to hear. Maya couldn't make out the words, but she recognized the tone, sharp, dismissive, and too familiar. She walked calmly to the front row of the cabin and slid into seat 1A. The seat was spacious. With a wide armrest and a soft leather headrest she leaned back into. She exhaled slowly, letting her shoulders relax. It would have been a peaceful moment if not for the sudden footsteps emerging from the cockpit. The steps were firm, annoyed, growing louder. Then he appeared, Captain Daniel Briggs. Tall, square shoulders, a strong jaw, and an expression that carried the arrogance of someone who had spent too many years giving orders without being questioned. His uniform was immaculate, the captain's stripes on his shoulders crisp and bright. He scanned the cabin quickly. His eyes skipped right past the Grants, then landed on Maya, and stayed there. His brows drew together almost immediately. Not confusion, not surprise. Something colder. He walked toward her with deliberate slowness. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, planting himself beside her seat. "I believe you're in the wrong place." Maya looked up, her expression still gentle. "This is seat 1A. "Correct." Captain Briggs pressed his lips together. "Yes, but this seat is reserved for VIP passengers. Passengers who are authorized to sit here." Maya let a small silence pass between them before she responded. "I am authorized." Briggs stiffened. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding documents. This seat isn't meant for people who aren't on the manifest as priority travelers." His pause before the word people didn't go unnoticed. Vivian Grant watched with thinly veiled satisfaction, leaning slightly toward Harold. Maya caught her whisper this time. "I knew she didn't belong up there." Harold only grunted. Maya inhaled slowly. The scent of leather mixed with the faint citrus of the cabin air freshener. For a moment, she wished she had chosen a different day to do this, a quieter day, a day without witnesses. But then again, maybe this was exactly the day she was meant to be here. Captain Briggs folded his arms. "Ma'am, if you don't move to the back, I'll have to call airport security. We can't have boarding delays." Maya's heart didn't race, her palms didn't sweat. Instead, she felt something deeper, something old stirring quietly within her. A familiar ache, a familiar weariness, a familiar question. Why does this keep happening? Why do people look at me and see everything but who I am? Her voice remained steady. "I'm not moving." Briggs blinked, clearly annoyed. "Then I need you to understand that you're interfering with flight operations, and that can be a safety issue." "That sounds like a serious accusation," she replied gently. "It is," he snapped. For a moment, the cabin fell silent. The Grants watched eagerly, like spectators waiting for drama to unfold. The tension spread thick in the air, heavy and invasive. Yet Maya sat still, hands folded lightly on her lap, her coffee cup resting beside her. She would not raise her voice. She would not explain herself. She would not defend her right to simply exist where she belonged. Not yet, because sometimes the quiet before the storm is where the truth gathers its power. And this storm was only beginning. The cabin settled into a heavy stillness after Captain Daniel Briggs delivered his warning. The soft hum of the ventilation system seemed louder in that moment, filling the silence that no one dared to break. Outside the windows, morning light warmed the wings of the aircraft, but inside, a colder atmosphere held every person in place. Maya Carter stayed seated, the calm in her expression almost unsettling in its steadiness. She did not shift her posture. She did not lower her eyes. She simply breathed in and out as if she had all the time in the world. Captain Briggs, on the other hand, looked as though patience had just slipped out of his hands. He cleared his throat and straightened his uniform jacket. His posture stiffened. He leaned a little closer to Maya in a way that felt less like professionalism and more like an attempt to regain control he feared he was losing. "Ma'am, I am trying to be respectful," he said through tight lips, "but I will need to verify your travel status now. Seat 1A is selected for priority passengers only." Maya raised her gaze to meet his. Her eyes did not hold challenge. They simply held truth. There was nothing reckless in them, only a quiet boundary that had been crossed far too many times throughout her life. "I have already told you," she replied gently. "I am in the correct seat." Vivian Grant let out a dramatic sigh from across the aisle. The kind of sigh that was meant to be heard, the kind intended to show annoyance without having to speak the words. She turned a little toward Harold, whispering something that made his jaw tighten. Maya sensed their stare, but did not give them the satisfaction of acknowledgement. She had spent too many years in boardrooms where whispers bore the same sting, hidden insults disguised beneath polite tones, doubts planted in the corner of a room, growing like vines until they surrounded everything. Captain Briggs straightened again and stepped back slightly. His shoes clicked sharply against the cabin floor. He looked toward the cockpit where the first officer was performing pre-flight checks, then toward the flight attendant preparing the galley. Her name was Lauren Fisher. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, and she carried an expression of someone who had learned to observe without being noticed. When her eyes met Maya's, there was a softness there, a recognition of something unspoken. Lauren hesitated before walking toward Captain Briggs. Her voice was polite, but slightly uncertain. "Captain, we might want to clarify things before we escalate." Her tone held a diplomatic quality. "It is a private charter. It could simply be a misunderstanding." Briggs shot her a sharp look. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is protocol?" Lauren nodded, but the hesitation in her stance remained. She turned to Maya with a gentle smile. "Do you need anything to make your flight more comfortable before departure?" Maya returned the smile with quiet gratitude. It was small, but in a room full of dismissal, even a flicker of respect felt like warmth. "No, thank you." The gratitude in her voice caught Lauren off guard for a second. Most wealthy passengers she served responded with irritation or entitlement. Maya's tone sounded entirely different. Real, measured, considerate. Captain Briggs stepped between them slightly, cutting the moment short. "Lauren, contact ground personnel and have them send someone down here. I want any irregularities addressed before we push back." Lauren looked between Maya and Briggs, clearly uneasy. She nodded and walked toward the galley phone, though her reluctance lingered with each step. Briggs turned back to Maya. "You will need to move until this is resolved." Maya stayed perfectly still, though a faint ache touched her chest. the kind of ache she no longer showed on her face, a private hurt she had learned to keep tucked away. There was a time when she would have explained herself, spiraled into proofs, apologies, explanations meant to appease people who had already decided what she was worth. But those days were gone. "This seat is mine," she replied softly. "I am not moving." Briggs inhaled sharply. His frustration simmered beneath his skin. Before he could respond, the Grants decided to add fuel to the rising tension. Vivian leaned forward in her seat, hands folded over her designer handbag. "Well," she said loudly enough for the cabin to hear, "this is exactly why private travel is becoming so stressful. Standards are dropping. There should be checks to prevent this kind of situation," Harold added. "If the airline expects us to continue using their services, they should make sure passengers are appropriately placed." Maya felt the sting of their words, not because they were new, but because they were old, exhaustingly old. Same tone, same implication, same judgment wrapped in polite language. Lauren returned, her footsteps light but hesitant, as though she wished she could undo the request she had been forced to make. "Ground staff is on the way," she said quietly. Captain Briggs nodded in approval. Maya looked at him calmly. "You are making this situation more complicated than it needs to be." Briggs stiffened. "Ma'am, I have a responsibility to maintain order." "Order," Maya repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "Is this what you believe order looks like?" Briggs opened his mouth to respond, but something in her tone made him pause. There was no sarcasm, no defiance, just a question he did not know how to answer. Lauren stepped aside as the cabin door opened slightly and a ground staff member approached. The man looked between Briggs and Maya with uncertainty, already sensing the tension. "Is there a problem?" Captain Briggs gestured toward Maya. "This passenger is refusing to comply with seating instructions. I need her moved to the back until we verify her identity." The staff member turned to Maya, offering a polite but awkward smile. "Ma'am, could I please see your documentation?" Maya did not reach for her bag. She did not argue. She simply looked at him with a calmness that felt stronger than any raised voice. "My documents are in order," she said. "There is nothing to verify." The staff member looked uncomfortable. His eyes flicked toward Briggs, who folded his arms with a sense of ownership over the situation. Lauren's voice broke the silence. "Captain, the manifest does list Ms. Carter as a passenger. The details match. There are no irregularities." Briggs did not look convinced. "That may be, but I need to verify her priority status. That seat is reserved." Maya watched all of them. She watched their discomfort, their confusion, their assumptions. She felt a quiet sadness settle inside her chest. She thought of the nights she spent drafting proposals in motel rooms during the early years of her business. She thought of the meetings where people asked her if she was the assistant or the administrative staff. She thought of the banks that told her she lacked the right profile for investment. She thought of the moments she had to swallow her pride to survive. Now she sat in front of people who still could not see her. Not really. Not truly. Not beyond the surface they had decided was enough. The ground staff shifted his weight. "Captain," he said carefully, "if the manifest confirms her presence, maybe we should proceed. The weather system moving toward the area might cause delays. We are already pressed for time." Briggs looked at him as though he had betrayed him. "This is my aircraft. I decide what is necessary for safety." The words hung in the air, heavy, absolute, final. Maya clasped her hands gently on her lap. The cabin lights reflected softly off her skin. She sat still, allowing a breath to settle in her lungs. She felt a quiet battle begin inside her. A battle between exhaustion and resolve. Between letting this moment pass or letting the truth speak in its own time. She spoke quietly, barely above a whisper, but it carried through the entire cabin. "Some things should not need proving, but since we are here, I will wait." No one knew what she meant. Not yet. But the shift in her tone marked the beginning of something none of them were prepared for. And the story continued its slow, deliberate climb toward the point where truth would break the silence. The air inside the cabin felt different now. Heavier, as if the tension had gathered its own weight and settled calmly into every corner. Even the muted engines humming outside seemed to quiet themselves, leaving only the sound of steady breathing and strained patience. Maya Carter remained seated in her place at the very front. Her hands rested on her lap. Fingers relaxed, though her chest held a deeper stillness. The kind of stillness that grows inside someone who has been here before. In rooms where she was seen but not recognized. In halls where people evaluated her worth in silence. In moments where dignity felt like something she had to hold tightly or risk losing entirely. Captain Daniel Briggs stood near her seat, jaw tense as though he had bitten down on something sharp. Every shift of his weight betrayed his irritation. He was a man who was used to things moving because he commanded them to, and he was not accustomed to a quiet refusal. Behind him, Harold Grant tapped impatiently on the armrest of his seat. The sound reminded Maya of dripping water in a faucet, steady and persistent. Vivian Grant leaned back with frustrated elegance, eyes narrowed as if she had been personally wronged. Lauren Fisher remained on the side, unsure of whether to speak. Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers twisting subtly, revealing her discomfort. She kept glancing at Maya in a way that hinted at guilt, as if she wished she could undo the tension swelling in the room. The ground staff member was still there, shifting awkwardly near the aisle. His posture suggested he wanted to disappear. He had done his part, and now he was caught in conflict he had not asked for. Maya breathed in. The scent of soft leather and citrus still lingered, but it mixed now with the faint smell of anxiety. Human fear had its own scent, she thought, something quiet yet palpable, like air that thickens before a storm. Captain Briggs finally spoke. "Ma'am, this is your final chance to relocate. Once again, I am requesting your cooperation." His voice contained no softness, only authority wrapped too tightly around pride. Lauren winced slightly as if the tone wounded her. She stepped forward, her voice tentative. "Captain, the situation is not escalating on her part. We do not have a safety threat." Briggs turned toward her. "I am responsible for this cabin. I will decide what constitutes a threat." Vivian nodded in approval, pleased to have someone enforce the order she believed she deserved. She glanced at Maya with a type of superiority that felt familiar to anyone who had spent a lifetime being underestimated. Harold cleared his throat. "If this causes us to take off late, I will be notifying the company," he announced, though his gaze never left Maya, as if his complaint was meant for her, not the airline. Maya looked down briefly, not in defeat, but in contemplation. She allowed herself a small moment to sort through the emotions stirring beneath her calm. She felt tired, not physically, but in a way that settled deep in her bones. The kind of tired that came from the repetition of experiences like this one. The quiet battles that accompanied every space she entered. She lifted her gaze again and met Captain Briggs' eyes. "Is it truly order you are trying to maintain?" she asked softly. "Or something else?" Briggs blinked. The quiet question hit him in a place he did not expect. His expression faltered for half a second before he renewed his firmness. "This is protocol." Maya studied him, the way a person studies a riddle they have seen many times before. Lauren stepped closer, unable to stay silent. "Captain, if the manifest confirms her presence, then her seating should be respected until there is real evidence of an issue." Briggs turned sharply. "Lauren, enough." The sudden tension in his voice traveled through the air like a cold breeze. Lauren stepped back, her confidence shrinking, though her concern did not. The ground staff member cleared his throat again. Captain Briggs, if there is no irregularity on the manifest, we really should prepare for departure. Briggs exhaled, long and irritated. Maya could sense the pressure building inside him. He felt his control slipping, and he did not like it. He was clinging to the idea that one of the passengers had broken the unspoken rules of appearance and hierarchy. She had done nothing wrong. Yet somehow she was the one disrupting the order of his world. Briggs took one more step toward her, lowering his voice. You are making this more complicated than necessary. I am asking you to cooperate. Maya tilted her head slightly. I am cooperating. No, you are resisting. Maya let a quiet pause linger. The kind that invites a deeper reflection, the kind that forces the other person to hear what they do not want to face. I am resisting mistreatment, she replied. Her words were soft, but they reached every ear in the cabin. Briggs frowned. Defensive now. No one is mistreating you. Vivian let out a small laugh. Amused. Of course not. He is simply trying to help you understand the rules. Maya looked at her, then at Harold, then back at Briggs. Her eyes held a calm truth shaped by years of experience. It is interesting how often the people who cause discomfort claim they are only following rules, yet the rules always seem to target the same kind of person. Silence followed. Lauren's expression changed. Something inside her recognized the truth in those words. She shifted her weight and looked away, blinking hard. Briggs tried to maintain his ground. The rules exist for a reason. Maya nodded slowly. Yes, some rules help us. Some rules protect us. But some rules hide what people are too afraid to say out loud. Briggs swallowed. His face tightened even more. For the first time since boarding, Maya felt the first spark of something shifting in the room. Not enough to change the course, but enough to show that the surface was cracking. The ground staff member looked uncertain, his eyes darting between them. Captain, if we do not begin taxiing soon, the weather system moving in could cause a delay of several hours. Briggs did not answer. Instead, he paused. He seemed to be calculating something in his mind. Something about authority, control, and the thin thread holding his command together. Maya watched him. Her expression softened, though not out of sympathy, more out of understanding. She knew what it looked like when someone struggled against the truths they refused to name. Captain, she said quietly, you are trying to solve a problem that does not exist. He shot her a look that revealed frustration and something much deeper, something close to fear, the fear of being wrong in front of others. Vivian spoke again from her seat. I truly do not see why all this discussion is needed. She can simply sit where she belongs. There it was, the real slip, the truth exposed without disguise. Lauren's breath caught. Even Harold shifted uncomfortably, his confidence shaken for a second. Maya turned her gaze toward the window. The morning sky stretched wide across the horizon, pale blue with long streaks of white cloud. She felt a moment of calm when she looked at it, a reminder that the world was larger than the walls of this cabin. She spoke again, her voice even calmer. I know you believe you are maintaining order, but what you are doing is choosing comfort over fairness. Captain Briggs inhaled sharply. His eyes hardened again. I am maintaining safety. Maya met his gaze. No. You are maintaining assumptions. Briggs seemed taken aback by the clarity in her tone. He did not know how to respond. Lauren stepped forward again, her hands gently trembling. Captain, maybe we should take a moment. She is not raising her voice. She is not interfering. She is simply sitting. Briggs gave her a stern look. Lauren, stay in your area of responsibility. Lauren lowered her gaze. But something in her expression shifted. Determination. A quiet kind of courage. The ground staff member finally spoke again. I think we need to move forward. If the manifest confirms her presence, then there is no reason to remove her. Briggs clenched his jaw. Maya studied him again. This time, She saw the first crack in his armor, a small, fleeting glimpse of uncertainty. It was the beginning of the unraveling. She could feel it. She did not smile. She did not lean back triumphantly. She only folded her hands more gently and whispered inwardly, as if speaking to her younger self, "Hold your ground. You know who you are." And the cabin, for the briefest moment, felt like it was holding its breath. The unraveling had begun. The hush inside the cabin deepened as if every sound softened itself to avoid disturbing the unfolding tension. The aircraft had not moved an inch, yet the atmosphere felt as if it were drifting slowly toward a point of no return. Maya Carter kept her posture steady, though she felt the pressure continue its slow rise around her. There was no tremble in her hands, no hint of fear in her eyes, but inside her chest, a familiar ache began to pulse quietly, reminding her of the countless moments life had already tested her patience. Captain Daniel Briggs remained standing. His expression hardened into a shape that seemed carved from certainty and pride. His stance showed a refusal to back down. He held his chin high, as though retreat would fracture something he believed he needed to protect. Harold Grant and Vivian Grant sat in their seats like spectators waiting for a performance to resume, though their presence felt more like an unwanted chorus that reinforced the captain's assumptions. Vivian shifted her diamond bracelet and glanced toward Maya with an air of superiority that made the cabin feel even smaller. Lauren Fisher continued to linger near the galley, her hands pressed together in a soft clasp. Every time she looked at Maya, her eyes filled with quiet regret. She seemed to carry something unspoken inside her, something that urged her to do more, yet held her back with the weight of hierarchy. The ground staff member remained near the cabin door. His uncertain posture had not changed, and he seemed to shrink deeper into discomfort with every minute that passed. Captain Briggs finally released a heavy breath as if gathering himself for the next step. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "we cannot proceed with boarding in this state of confusion. I need you to relocate. I have explained this clearly." Maya lifted her gaze toward him. Her voice remained as calm as still water. "I understand what you want, but I have told you that you are mistaken." Briggs stiffened again, irritation pulsing beneath his words. "And I have told you that this is a matter of maintaining the proper use of this cabin." Maya let a quiet moment pass before her answer. "What you are maintaining has nothing to do with the seat I occupy." Those words settled over him like a shadow he could not shake away. Vivian Grant scoffed softly. The sound carried a sharp edge that made Lauren tense. "This is ridiculous," Vivian said, turning toward Harold. "We pay for private travel to avoid these kinds of disruptions, not to be held up because someone refuses to follow basic directions." Harold nodded, though his face showed the first signs of discomfort. He seemed unsure of how deeply he wanted to involve himself. Lauren stepped forward slightly. "Mrs. Grant, the manifest confirms all passengers. There is no issue with Miss Carter being in that seat." Vivian waved her off with a dismissive flick of her hand. "That may be what the paperwork says, but clearly someone is confused about where they belong." The word struck Maya with a familiar sting, a sting she had felt in classrooms where teachers assumed she could not keep up, in offices where colleagues overlooked her contributions, in meetings where clients spoke past her as if she were invisible. She remembered sitting in a small room in her early 20s, interviewing for a junior consultant role. She remembered the hiring manager glancing at her resume, then at her hair, then at her skin. She remembered the pause, long enough to show doubt, short enough to mask itself as thought. She had walked out of that room determined to build a world where no one could tell her where she belonged. Her voice now held that quiet strength. "I am exactly where I belong." Captain Briggs inhaled sharply. "Ma'am, you are disrupting flight operations. I have to consider the safety and comfort of all passengers." "Safety," Maya repeated gently. "You keep returning to that word. It is my duty. Your duty should be to truth and fairness." Briggs' jaw tightened. The ground staff member attempted to intervene again, his tone softer. "Captain Briggs, perhaps we should reconsider. She is calm. She is seated. The manifest is accurate. We do not have justification to remove her." Briggs did not appreciate being challenged, even in the slightest. His shoulders squared defensively. "I will not have my authority challenged in my own cabin." The words rang with finality. Lauren looked down for a moment, then lifted her head with a quiet courage that surprised even her. "Captain, with all respect, authority is not the issue here." Briggs snapped his attention toward her. "Lauren, that is enough." But she did not step back this time. Her voice trembled only slightly, but her words carried the weight of something she had kept inside for too long. "If we treat people differently based on what we assume about them, then we are not maintaining order, we are creating it." Briggs stared at her, stunned. Maya felt something shift inside her, a brief spark of warmth. Someone was speaking a truth she had carried alone for years. Vivian looked offended by Lauren's boldness. "This is entirely inappropriate." Harold murmured something under his breath, likely agreeing. Briggs turned away from them all, pacing a short line across the aisle. His frustration grew clearer with each step. Maya watched him with a calm that came from experience. She did not enjoy conflict. She never had. But she had long accepted that life often required her to stand firm in the face of it. Her internal voice whispered softly, "You have endured worse. Stay steady." She looked at Briggs. "Captain, what is it you believe I am doing wrong?" The question caught him off guard. He stopped pacing. "You are refusing to follow instructions." "No. I am refusing to accept an instruction rooted in a false assumption." His eyes narrowed. "I am responsible for this aircraft. I cannot simply take chances. And what chance am I presenting to you?" Briggs had no answer. His mouth opened slightly before he closed it again. Lauren took one more step forward, emboldened. She is not acting unpredictably. She is not causing conflict. She is sitting in a seat that is assigned on the manifest. Vivian interjected sharply. "Assigned accidentally. I am sure. Let us be reasonable." Maya turned her head slowly, not in anger, more in reflection. There is nothing reasonable about asking someone to move simply because you feel uncomfortable with how they look. Vivian opened her mouth, closed it, then lifted her chin as if that alone could restore her authority. Harold shifted again, visibly uncomfortable now. He had not expected to become part of something that revealed so much about the people sitting beside him. Captain Briggs attempted once more to reclaim control. "Ma'am, please understand. I need clarity. That is all." "No," Maya answered softly. "What you need is honesty." Briggs blinked, taken aback. "There is honesty," she continued gently, "in admitting when we have allowed assumptions to guide our choices." Silence spread through the cabin like a slow wave. Lauren's eyes softened. Harold swallowed. Vivian clenched her handbag. Briggs stood motionless. For the first time since boarding, Maya felt the faint tremble of uncertainty ripple through him. Her voice lowered, almost to a whisper. "Think carefully before you decide what comes next." A quiet storm was gathering, not loud, not violent, but powerful in the way truth always is when it rises slowly and refuses to be pushed aside. And the cabin sensed it. Every person felt the shifting air, the approaching turning point. The unraveling had only just begun. The air in the cabin held a trembling quiet, as if every breath inside that narrow space carried its own unspoken weight. No one moved. No one reached for a bag or shifted in their seat. Time itself seemed to pause and listen. Maya Carter stayed exactly where she was, seated with an elegance that did not need announcement. Her stillness was not surrender. It was presence. It was the presence of someone who had learned that silence could be powerful when spoken with intention. Her eyes rested on Captain Daniel Briggs, who stood only a few steps away, his chest rising and falling in quickened breaths. He carried himself like a man who believed he needed to win this moment, to preserve something deeply tied to who he was. Yet there was a flicker behind his stern expression, something like doubt, something like discomfort pressed into a corner. Lauren Fisher watched him with worry growing across her face. She stood near the galley but no longer hid behind duty. Her voice, earlier fragile, now held a steady tremor of conviction. She seemed torn between fear of the consequences and a quiet demand for fairness. Harold Grant leaned forward with unease that had not existed earlier. He shifted his hands over his knees, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His wife, Vivian Grant, sat upright with rehearsed confidence, though her clenched jaw betrayed irritation. The ground staff member lingered by the doorway, his shoulders tense. He kept looking toward the open cabin door as if hoping someone else might appear and lift the responsibility off his back. The silence pressed down on all of them. Finally, Maya breathed out, a slow breath that carried the heaviness of many past wounds she had never allowed to define her. Her voice emerged in a gentle tone that held far more strength than volume. "Captain Briggs," she said softly, "do you understand what this moment is becoming for all of us, including you?" Briggs looked at her with guarded confusion. He traced her face as if trying to read a meaning he had never considered before. Maya continued, her voice steady and clear. "You believe you are protecting something important, but you are not seeing the cost." Briggs stiffened again. He raised his chin, ready to defend himself. "I am protecting the integrity of this flight," he replied, his voice filled with authority he seemed to be clinging to. Maya did not look away. And what integrity is left when fairness is abandoned? Her question floated through the air like a soft echo. It struck Briggs with unexpected force. His fingers curled slightly at his sides. Before he could respond, Vivian spoke, her tone sharp and impatient. "I really do not see why we are entertaining this any longer. Captain, you are the authority here. Simply make her move. This is going in circles." Lauren shifted closer, her voice trembling with restrained frustration. "It is going in circles because the problem is not hers." Vivian glared at her. "The problem is the delay." "The problem," Lauren said quietly, "is the judgment." Harold exhaled heavily, torn between his wife's expectations and the discomfort of the truth unfolding in front of him. Briggs attempted again to break through the tension. "We need resolution," he insisted. "We cannot remain parked here. Our schedule is compromised." Maya allowed another moment to pass before responding. Her voice took on a deeper note, one that carried more of her inner world. "Do you think I enjoy conflict?" she asked softly. "Do you think I came here hoping for this moment? I came to travel in peace. Yet peace is always the first thing questioned when people cannot reconcile the image they hold of you with the reality in front of them." Briggs blinked again, his breath catching for a brief second. Maya lowered her eyes, not in surrender, but in reflection. "When I was younger," she said quietly, "I believed that working hard and carrying myself with dignity would be enough. I believed people would see effort and truth. But life has taught me something. Some people do not see you. They see the story they already wrote about you before you speak a word." She lifted her gaze. "And you, Captain, have decided my story before learning my name." Her words fell into the room with such clarity that Lauren's breath shook. Even Harold turned toward Maya with visible unease. Briggs tightened his grip on the back of the seat nearest him, as though grounding himself. "This is not personal," he replied stiffly. "I do not know you. I only know the rules." Maya gave a small nod that carried both sadness and understanding. "That is exactly why it is personal," Vivian scoffed, unable to hold back her annoyance. "This is absurd. Captain, your authority is being challenged by unnecessary dramatics. Just handle the situation." Briggs glanced at Vivian, then at Maya, caught between pressure and truth. His face reflected the internal conflict he had no training to navigate. Lauren stepped forward with greater resolve. "Captain, please listen. You are focusing on a seat instead of listening to what is being said. That seat is not the problem." Briggs turned sharply toward her. "You are out of line." Lauren did not move back. She did not bow her head. Her voice remained steady, even as her hands trembled slightly. "I am not out of line," she answered quietly. "I am acknowledging what everyone in this cabin is feeling." Vivian shook her head with frustrated disbelief. This is why standards are falling everywhere. People forget their roles. Lauren turned her eyes toward Vivian. Sometimes roles need to be questioned when they cause harm. Maya felt something inside her shift, a warmth rising from a place she had kept guarded. Lauren's courage was unexpected, fragile, and real. She looked back at Briggs with a gentleness that contrasted the strain in the room. "Captain," she said, "you stand in a position of responsibility. You can create fairness or deny it. You can calm this moment or allow it to become something it never needed to be." Briggs took a breath, but the air caught in his throat. Maya continued, "Your uniform gives you authority, but authority is not the same as respect. Respect is earned by how you treat the people who have no power in a moment like this." Her voice deepened with quiet emotion. "And right now, you are choosing pride over respect." The ground staff member swallowed hard and shifted on his feet. He looked at the captain with uncertainty, as if silently hoping Briggs would not push this further. Harold leaned back in his seat, discomfort etched across his features. He was beginning to see the edges of something he had not considered before. The truth was no longer soft. It was revealing itself plainly. Vivian turned toward him sharply. "Say something," she ordered quietly. Harold lowered his eyes. "I think," he murmured, "that the situation is not as simple as we thought." Vivian stared at him, stunned by his refusal to join her side. Maya saw it. Another crack, a small shift in understanding pulling forward. She took another slow breath and spoke again. "There comes a moment," she said, "when patience begins to feel like silence, and silence begins to feel like surrender." Her words trembled with honesty, not anger. "I have held patience all my life, but not at the cost of my dignity." Briggs closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, something different lived behind them. Uncertainty, conflict, a dawning realization that the situation he had tried to control was unraveling in ways he never intended. Lauren stepped closer, gently placing herself between Maya and the captain, though not fully blocking either. "Captain," she whispered, "please take a breath." Briggs hesitated. His shoulders rose, then fell. For the first time, he looked at Maya not as an obstacle, but as a person who had endured far more than he had ever understood. The moment stretched thin, fragile, almost trembling with possibility. Maya held his gaze. "Choose wisely, Captain." Outside the window, the wind shifted across the tarmac, a quiet reminder that storms often begin with a single unsettled breath. And inside the cabin, the line between authority and conscience grew thinner, almost ready to break. The cabin felt as if it were holding its breath. A heavy stillness wrapped itself around every seat, every panel, every quiet shift of air from the vents overhead. Maya Carter could sense the tension pressing inward, gathering like a storm that refused to release its first strike. Captain Daniel Briggs stood motionless, caught in a tangle of duty, pride, and the faint sharpness of self-doubt. His face no longer held the certainty he carried earlier. Something had broken loose within him, though he tried hard to hide it. Lauren Fisher watched him with a gentle fear tucked behind her eyes. She stood close enough to intervene, but far enough to respect the delicate thread between all of them. Her hands were clasped at her waist, knuckles slightly pale, Harold Grant leaned back in his seat in a quiet swallow of discomfort, as though he no longer knew which side of this moment he wanted to belong to. Vivian Grant remained upright and tense, her expression sharpened by irritation and disbelief. Her lips were pressed together in a thin line that suggested she felt control slipping away from her as well. Outside the windows, the morning sky had softened into pale gold. Light spilled across the wing of the Carter Airjet X9 with a steady glow, offering a warmth that the cabin itself lacked. Maya lifted her chin with a soft inhale. Not an act of defiance, an act of grounding. The ache in her chest had deepened, but it no longer felt like fear. It felt like memory. A familiar memory of moments when she had to decide which part of herself she would protect and which part she would let the world see. Her voice emerged with the gentleness of someone who understood the weight of silence far too well. "Captain," she said quietly, "you have a choice in this moment, and your choice will echo longer than you think." Briggs opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat tightened with a dryness he had not felt before. Lauren stepped forward half an inch, her voice soft but steady. "We cannot keep going like this. Everyone here feels the strain. Even you." Briggs turned toward her as if the sound of empathy unsettled him more than the conflict itself. Vivian exhaled loudly. "This is getting ridiculous. You are the authority. Captain, the situation is straightforward." Harold placed a cautious hand on her arm. "Vivian, maybe we should wait before saying more." She pulled her arm away with a look that carried silent judgment. Maya watched all of them, noticing each reflection of discomfort. It was a familiar sight. People struggling to face the truth of their actions when it was placed gently in front of them. She kept her tone soft. "Do you know what it feels like," she began, "to spend your whole life preparing to enter rooms where people look at you and see only what they assume?" Briggs looked at her in a way that suggested he was finally listening. Maya continued, "You work twice as hard. You stand twice as still. You speak half as loud. And still, someone looks at you and decides you must explain your right to be there." Her fingers interlaced quietly on her lap. "I have lived through more of those moments than I can count. But I never imagined I would meet one today." Briggs swallowed. His jaw twitched. "This is not about your right," he said softly, though his confidence faltered. "I am simply trying to follow procedure." Maya tilted her head slightly. "Procedure is meant to guide us, not hide us." Her words lingered. The ground staff member shifted his stance again, his discomfort growing. Lauren spoke next, her voice somewhat stronger now, though still gentle. "Captain Briggs, the manifest does not lie. Miss Carter has every right to sit here, and she does not owe us anything more." Vivian rolled her eyes, but the gesture held less certainty than before. Something inside her seemed shaken by the unity growing between Maya and Lauren. Briggs looked away for a moment, staring down the aisle as though searching for an answer he had misplaced. Maya watched him quietly. "I am not asking you to apologize," she said. "I am asking you to recognize the truth in front of you." Briggs breathed in deeply, his chest rising with the weight of realization. Maya felt a swell of quiet sadness. "When I first stepped onto this flight," she continued, "I hoped for nothing more than a peaceful journey. But instead, I was asked to justify my presence." Briggs spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "I did not mean to single you out," Maya replied with calm clarity. "Your intention is not the issue. Your impact is—" The room sank into another wave of silence. Harold looked from Maya to the captain, then back to Maya, as if questioning his own earlier assumptions. Vivian shifted in her seat in a way that suggested she was wrestling with something deeply uncomfortable. Lauren took another small step forward, voice soft. "Captain, we can still move forward. We can resolve this without more pain." Briggs closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to settle the storm inside him. When he spoke again, his voice held a quiet crack. "What would you have me do?" he asked. looking at Maya with an openness he had not shown before. Maya did not hesitate. "I want you to see me." Briggs looked at her with confusion. "I am looking at you." "No," Maya said gently. "You are looking at my seat. You are looking at your expectations. You are looking at the story you imagined before learning my truth. I want you to see me." Her voice softened even more. "Just see me." A long silence followed. Not heavy, not angry, only quiet. Deep quiet. The kind that arrives when the truth finally reveals itself. Lauren whispered to the captain, "Let go, sir. Just let go of what you think this moment should look like." Briggs looked at her with weary eyes. "And what if I was wrong?" "Then you learn," Lauren said softly. "We all do." Vivian looked at the captain, unsure now of whether she should speak. Something had shifted in her, too. Her indignation no longer had the same strength. Harold offered Maya a quiet nod, as if acknowledging something he had failed to see earlier. The ground staff member stepped closer, speaking in a respectful tone. "Captain Briggs, the longer we wait, the stronger the incoming weather will be. If we do not resolve this now, we may be grounded for hours." Briggs heard him, but did not respond. He looked at Maya again, really looked, and for the first time, something changed in his face. Gone was the rigid pride. Gone was the defensive certainty. Gone was the assumption that he knew the truth. Now there was recognition. Soft, human, uncertain, real. Maya held his gaze. "You can still do the right thing," she whispered. Briggs felt the words settle into him. His breath shook slightly. For the first time since stepping into the cabin, he seemed ready to consider a different path. The cabin lights hummed softly above them, waiting for him to speak. Maya could feel the moment shifting. The truth was inching closer to the surface. It was only a matter of time before it broke open. For a long moment, no one spoke. The entire cabin seemed suspended in a quiet tension, as if the air was waiting for Captain Daniel Briggs to decide which direction the moment would turn. Outside, the sunlight grew brighter, reflecting off the metal wings with an almost blinding shimmer, as though the world outside remained calm, even while the world inside wrestled with itself. Maya Carter remained seated with calm grace. Her posture relaxed, yet resolute. She did not need to lean forward or raise her voice. Her stillness had its own kind of authority, one built from years of learning how to hold her ground without losing her peace. Briggs looked at her with eyes that no longer carried the clean lines of certainty. There was hesitation in them now, and something else, something quieter, something he was not used to acknowledging. Lauren Fisher stood nearby, her hands trembling gently, though her face held the tender strength of someone who wanted to do right even when the moment felt bigger than her. She watched the captain with a worry that grew deeper with every passing second. Harold Grant shifted again in his seat, clearing his throat softly. His earlier confidence had evaporated. He seemed smaller now, reconsidering everything he had assumed at the start of the conflict. Vivian Grant still held herself stiffly, but the edge in her posture had softened. She looked around the cabin uneasily, as if unsure how to position herself in a moment she no longer fully understood. The ground staff member remained near the doorway, hoping silently that a resolution would appear from either side before he was pulled further into this unexpected confrontation. Maya watched Briggs with quiet patience. "Take your time," she said gently. "Truth does not need to be rushed." Briggs exhaled slowly, a breath that seemed to release more than air. It carried a burden, something heavy he had been clinging to since the start. He rubbed his temple with the back of his knuckle, a subtle gesture of exhaustion. His voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "You are asking me to admit something I am not sure I know how to admit." Maya nodded slightly. "You do not have to know the words. You only need honesty." Vivian let out a small huff, though her tone lacked the fire it once carried. This is turning into something unnecessary. The flight needs to leave. Why continue dragging this out? Lauren looked at her with gentle sadness. It continues because the harm continues, she said softly. Moments like this do not appear out of nowhere. They come from long histories people pretend not to see. Vivian's lips tightened, but she did not reply. Harold looked at his hands, then at Maya, then at Briggs, his confusion written plainly across his face. Maya focused her attention back on the captain. "Captain Briggs, this is not about blame," she said. "This is about recognition. Recognition has power. It can open the door to a different path." Briggs took another breath. This one trembled slightly. "I am trying," he said quietly. "I know," Maya replied. He blinked, surprised by the tenderness in her voice. She continued, "I do not expect perfection. I expect presence. I expect willingness to see what lies beneath the surface." Briggs lowered his eyes. "I have never dealt with a situation like this," he admitted. "That is not a flaw," Maya replied. "It is simply an opportunity." Lauren stepped forward, her voice gentle. "No one expects you to have all the answers, Captain, but the way you respond now will stay with all of us, including you." Harold nodded inadvertently, though he did not speak. Vivian looked away, her thoughts shifting in ways she did not want to confess. Briggs ran his fingers through the air beside him, as if weighing the invisible heaviness resting there. "I thought I was following my training," he said slowly. "I thought I was upholding the standards I have always been taught." Maya leaned back slightly. "And what do those standards look like in your mind?" Briggs hesitated. "They look like order, structure, clear roles, predictable behavior." "And what about dignity?" Maya asked. Briggs looked up sharply. "What of it? Does dignity fit into those standards you hold?" Briggs opened his mouth, then paused. His breath caught. He stared at Maya in a way that showed a piece of his understanding had just fallen into place. Maya softened her voice. "Order without dignity is control. Structure without humanity is force. Roles without understanding are cages." A small shiver passed through the cabin. Even the buzzing overhead lights seemed to settle in respect. Lauren's eyes filled with quiet emotion. Harold swallowed hard. Vivian looked unsettled. Maya continued, "I am not here to challenge your position. I am here to remind you that leadership is not the same as command. Leadership requires seeing the people in front of you, truly seeing them." Briggs lowered his shoulders. The tension that had been holding him upright loosened. "And if what I saw was wrong," he whispered, "where does that leave me?" Maya offered him a gentle nod. "It leaves you human. Humans learn." Briggs closed his eyes. His breath wavered. For the first time, he seemed smaller, not weaker, just human. A man confronting a truth he had never been asked to face in such a raw and quiet way. Vivian watched him closely, her expectations shifting into confusion. Harold finally spoke in a quiet voice. "Captain, maybe it is time to listen." Briggs looked at him, surprised to find support from someone who initially sided with him. Lauren added softly, "We can move forward only if we let go of what is holding us back." Briggs inhaled deeply, holding the breath for a long moment before letting it out. He looked at Maya again. "I do not know how to fix this." "You do not need to fix it," Maya said. "You only need to choose the truth." Briggs swallowed. "And what is the truth?" Maya's voice lowered into a calm that carried years of resilience. "The truth is that you made an assumption about me before you learned anything about me, and that assumption created harm." Briggs stared at her. "That is the truth," she continued. "There is no shame in naming it. The shame is in refusing to." Maya watched his expression soften, the resistance melting slowly beneath a dawning realization. Briggs took another slow breath, this one deeper, steadier. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "I see you." The words were simple, but they struck through the cabin like a quiet bell, resonating in places that needed to hear them. Lauren let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Harold looked relieved. Vivian looked conflicted. The ground staff member stood straighter. Maya's eyes softened as she listened to the words that had taken far too long to rise. "Thank you," she said gently. "That is the beginning." Briggs nodded faintly, still absorbing the weight of the moment. Maya continued, "Now you must choose what to do with that beginning." Briggs looked at the seat, then at the aisle, then at the cabin door, then finally back at Maya. His voice returned with more strength. "I want to proceed the right way," he said. "Not the rigid way, the right way." Maya gave a small approving nod. "Then let us move forward." Briggs straightened his posture, but without the earlier hardness. His shoulders remained lifted, but his voice softened. "I will allow boarding to continue," he said quietly. "There is no issue with your seat." A gentle ripple of relief moved through the cabin, but something else lingered beneath that relief, a shifting awareness, a growing self-reflection, a quiet dismantling of assumptions. Maya breathed slowly, preparing for what she knew would come next. Truth had entered the room, but truth rarely arrived alone. It arrived with consequence, with revelation, with a path that would soon expose everything. The moment before the reveal had finally settled. The next moment would break everything open. The tension inside the cabin shifted once Captain Daniel Briggs finally allowed a fragile truth to settle between them. It did not dissolve entirely. It did not vanish into the air, but it loosened, the way a tightly wound rope begins to uncoil after being held under strain for far too long. A deep quiet settled over the room, a quiet that felt different from the earlier silence. It was not the silence of discomfort or denial. It was the silence that often comes right before something important reveals itself. Maya Carter rested her palms gently on her lap. Her shoulders eased, though her eyes remained watchful. This moment, she knew, was not the end of the conflict. It was only the beginning of its unraveling. Sometimes truth opened a door, but what stood behind that door often surprised everyone. Captain Briggs released another slow breath, as if his lungs had forgotten how to function without tension. He glanced down the aisle and then toward the cabin windows, letting his eyes roam the space as if reacquainting himself with the room he thought he understood when the morning began. Lauren Fisher allowed herself a small exhale of relief. Her hands loosened slightly, no longer held in the tight clasp she had kept through the entire ordeal, but her expression remained cautious. She sensed that something larger was still waiting beneath the surface of this moment. Harold Grant looked away from his wife, his attention drawn fully toward Maya. His earlier judgment had faded into a reflective unease. Vivian Grant sat upright with her arms folded, her attention flickering between Maya and the captain. She had not surrendered her disbelief, but the confidence with which she carried her assumptions had noticeably thinned. The ground staff member remained near the doorway, unsure whether to step out or remain available. He sensed something important was unfolding and did not want to intervene without reason. Yet leaving felt too abrupt for the still unresolved atmosphere. Captain Briggs looked at Maya again. "I want to do this correctly," he said quietly. "I want to move past the mistake." Maya regarded him with a calm focus. "Doing this correctly is not only about moving forward," she said gently. "It is also about understanding what brought us here." Briggs nodded slowly, though uncertainty still lingered in his movements. "And what do you suggest?" he asked, his voice softer. Maya let her gaze drift for a brief second, as though searching her own memory before answering. "You must acknowledge something before you can leave it behind," she replied. "And sometimes you must acknowledge it out loud." Briggs inhaled sharply, not prepared for the weight of that request. His jaw tightened, revealing the struggle between pride and conscience. Lauren stepped forward, adding her voice with quiet encouragement. "Captain, speaking the truth does not diminish your authority," she said. "It strengthens it." Vivian shifted in her seat, clearly irritated. "This is becoming unnecessary," she muttered, though her voice lacked its earlier force. "No one needs to make speeches." Maya turned her head toward Vivian, her expression soft but unwavering. "Sometimes words are necessary," she said, "especially when silence has caused harm." Vivian looked away, unwilling to respond. Harold studied Maya with deliberation, as if seeing something he had ignored too easily before. Briggs hesitated. He had always relied on procedure, manuals, rules. None of them had prepared him for the need to confront himself. Finally, he spoke. "I should not have questioned your right to be here," he said, his voice thick with discomfort. "I made assumptions, and those assumptions caused harm." Lauren closed her eyes briefly in quiet relief. Maya offered a small nod. "Thank you," she said. "Honesty can feel heavy at first, but it is the only foundation strong enough to build respect." Briggs lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of the truth he had just spoken. A burden lifted, but another one settled, a burden formed from the knowledge of his own imperfections. For a moment, no one moved. Then Maya gently broke the silence. "Captain Briggs, what seat do you believe belongs to me now?" Briggs looked up, his expression softening. "Your seat is the seat you claimed when you boarded," he said. "It is yours without question." Maya nodded again, gently. "Then we can begin the next step." Briggs frowned. "The next step?" he repeated. "Yes," Maya said. "We have reached the truth. Now we move toward understanding." Vivian scoffed under her breath, though the sound was quieter than before. Briggs looked puzzled. "What do you want me to understand?" Maya held his gaze with the kind of patience that had carried her through decades of resilience. "That I did not board this aircraft as a passenger who needed permission," she said. "I boarded as someone who belongs here, not by chance, not by error, but by right." Her voice grew even softer. "And I think it is time you understand why." Briggs blinked, utterly confused. Lauren watched her with widening eyes. She sensed something coming, something she had not yet realized the shape of. Harold lifted his head slowly, curiosity stirring. Vivian straightened unconsciously. The ground staff member froze, sensing the shift in tone. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, as if all the walls leaned inward to listen. Maya paused, letting the anticipation settle. Then she spoke with a calm conviction. "Captain Briggs, this aircraft does not belong to the airline." Briggs frowned deeply. "What do you mean?" Maya breathed slowly. "This aircraft belongs to a private owner. Every detail of its interior, every structural upgrade, every inspection frequency, every piece of authorization passes through that owner." Briggs blinked again, failing to grasp the direction of her words. "The owner works quietly," Maya continued. "She prefers privacy. She does not seek attention. She does not announce herself." Lauren felt her breath catch. Vivian's fingers curled around her armrest. Harold leaned forward without realizing it. The ground staff member lowered his head instinctively, as if preparing for something significant. Maya looked directly at Captain Briggs, her eyes calm but piercing. "That owner," she said, letting the words settle slowly, "is me." The cabin dropped into absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Captain Briggs stared at her, eyes widening as the realization struck him with full force. His face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came. Maya remained composed. "I own this aircraft," she repeated gently. "The Carter Airjet X9 belongs to my company. The flight operations team reports to us. The maintenance contracts are under our signature. Every route flown by this craft began as my idea." The air around them thickened. Lauren placed a hand over her mouth, overwhelmed by the truth. Harold blinked repeatedly, stunned. Vivian froze entirely, her certainty collapsing in an instant. The ground staff member bowed his head as understanding washed over him. Maya continued softly. I did not tell you earlier because I wanted to see how far you would go in your assumptions. And now you see. Briggs swallowed hard, his voice trembling. You own? Yes, Maya said softly. I own the plane. The truth finally broke open. Everything that came next would change the cabin forever. The silence that filled the cabin after Maya Carter revealed the truth felt heavier than any moment before. It pressed against every wall, every polished surface, every breath left hanging in the air. It was the kind of silence that only appears when something undeniable has been spoken and no one knows how to step forward from it. Captain Daniel Briggs stood at the center of the aisle as though the floor beneath him had shifted too quickly for him to regain balance, his eyes fixed on Maya, wide with disbelief. His lips barely parted as he tried to absorb the reality that had just been placed gently but firmly in front of him. Maya watched him with a calm that felt almost luminous. She did not gloat. She did not lean back with satisfaction. She remained steady, composed, grounded, as though this moment was simply another truth she had learned to carry. Lauren Fisher felt her knees soften as she exhaled, her hand instinctively reaching for the back of the nearest seat to steady herself. She stared at Maya with awe and sorrow intertwined, as if realizing she had been standing on the edge of a truth she had not known how to see. Harold Grant blinked rapidly, his earlier arrogance dissolving into a stunned confusion. He glanced at his wife, searching her expression for guidance. But Vivian Grant had turned utterly still. Her spine remained rigid, yet her face revealed cracks of disbelief. Her certainty, her entitlement, her judgments, all wavered under the weight of what Maya had revealed. The ground staff member lowered his gaze, unable to meet Maya's eyes, not out of disrespect, but out of humility, a quiet recognition that he had unknowingly stood as a witness to something much larger than a seating dispute. Maya allowed the silence to breathe for a moment longer before she spoke again. I have owned this aircraft for 3 years, she said softly. I designed the interior myself. Every detail in this cabin passed through my hands. Every safety inspection carries my approval. Briggs swallowed hard. I did not know, he whispered. Maya nodded gently. You did not ask. Those words slipped through the room like a slow current. Gentle, honest, unavoidable. Lauren looked toward the captain, her voice trembling. Captain, she tried to tell you. Briggs closed his eyes briefly as though the memory of his earlier certainty struck him painfully. Vivian shifted in her seat, her composure cracking. She lifted her chin, perhaps hoping to reclaim dignity, but her voice wavered when she spoke. Why would you not say so from the start? Maya turned her head to meet Vivian's gaze. Her expression held no hostility, only a calm clarity. Because my worth should not depend on what I own. Vivian's breath hitched softly. Maya continued with gentle steadiness. If my presence in this seat is acceptable only when you know I own the plane, then the acceptance is not real. It is conditional. It is fragile. It is hollow. Harold let out a quiet breath, almost a sigh, as if the truth had broken something inside him too. Captain Briggs took one unsteady step closer, his voice fractured. I did not mean to disrespect the owner of the aircraft, he murmured. Maya shook her head slowly. No, that is not where the apology belongs. Briggs stared at her, stunned. Maya's voice held a softness that revealed years of unspoken pain. The apology should not come from the fact that I am the owner. It should come from the fact that I am a person. The words settled over Briggs like a quiet revelation. His face softened, and the tension in his shoulders eased, replaced by something fragile and deeply human. I am sorry, he whispered, the words trembling as they slipped out. Not because of the plane, because I did not see you. Maya nodded. Her eyes held warmth now. Warm, but steady. Thank you. Lauren's lips parted, relief spilling out in a trembling exhale. Harold leaned back, looking at Maya with a newfound respect that had nothing to do with wealth. Vivian looked away, her fingers tightening around her armrest as she processed a truth she had not expected to confront. The ground staff member cleared his throat gently. Miss Carter, is there anything I can assist with? Maya shook her head with a soft smile. No. Your presence has been enough. The staff member bowed his head slightly before stepping back to give her space. Captain Briggs remained where he was, struggling to gather his thoughts. Maya watched him thoughtfully. Captain Briggs, she said, what matters now is how you choose to move forward. He nodded once, slowly. I want to move forward with respect, he said, and with understanding. Maya's smile deepened just a little. That is all anyone can ask. Briggs took a breath, steadier now. He addressed the room with renewed composure. We will continue preparations for departure, he announced, and Ms. Carter will remain exactly where she is. The words carried no hesitation now, only clarity. Vivian looked at her husband, a new uncertainty in her eyes. I cannot believe this, she whispered. Harold reached for her hand, surprising her. His voice was gentle. Maybe we were wrong. Vivian? Vivian's breath trembled, but she did not pull her hand away. Maya turned her head slightly toward them. You were misled by your own expectations, she said softly. It is easy to judge a moment before knowing its truth. We all have done it at some point. Vivian blinked rapidly, a small spark of vulnerability flickering behind her eyes. Does it not bother you, Vivian asked, that people speak to you as if you do not belong? Maya's answer came with a quiet, almost tender strength. It used to break me, she said. Now it only reminds me how far I have come. Lauren pressed a hand over her heart. Something in Maya's words reached deeply into her. Vivian looked down at her hands, her voice lower, softer. I did not know. I thought. Maya finished her thought gently. You thought you understood me before I said a word. Vivian nodded, unable to meet Maya's eyes. Maya added softly, you can walk away from this moment unchanged, or you can allow it to shift something inside you. Vivian swallowed hard. I think something has already shifted. A fragile peace began to settle over the room. Not complete peace, but the beginning of it. Captain Briggs turned toward Maya. Would you like anything before we resume preparations? He asked politely. A drink, a blanket, anything at all. Maya shook her head again. No, Captain. I only want us to continue with clarity. He nodded respectfully. I understand. For the first time since she boarded, the cabin felt lighter. The walls no longer pressed inward. The air no longer trembled. Yet beneath the calm, something far more significant was taking shape. This was not just a moment of revelation. It was the moment before responsibility would fall on every person in the room. And truth, once spoken, demanded action. Maya knew the journey was not over. There was still more to uncover, more to confront, more to choose. But for now, the room finally saw her, not as a question, not as a disruption, not as a misplaced passenger, but as Maya Carter, a woman with strength, a woman with history, a woman with ownership over her life, her choices, and this aircraft. And the story continued, steady as a heartbeat, moving toward its next unfolding. The moment after the cabin recognized Maya Carter for who she was lingered like soft smoke, drifting through every corner and settling quietly upon every person present. It was not triumphant. It was not sharp. It was a stillness shaped by truth, its edges gentle yet undeniable. Maya remained seated, her posture steady and composed. Her expression did not shift into pride or satisfaction. She simply breathed, her breath slow and measured, as if allowing herself to reclaim her place in the room, not through authority, but through quiet presence. Captain Daniel Briggs stood in the aisle with a posture that had changed entirely. The rigid command that once dominated his stance had dissolved into something humbled and thoughtful. His expression carried a deep reflection, as though he was tracing back through every moment that had led him here. Lauren Fisher watched him carefully, sensing the fragile transition in the air. She had always believed that truth could soften even the most resistant walls, and now she saw that belief unfolding slowly in front of her. For the first time, she allowed herself to stand a little taller. Harold Grant sat back in his seat with his fingers resting lightly against his knees. His eyes were locked on Maya, but they no longer held the earlier unease or doubt. Instead, they held curiosity, respect, and a faint, lingering discomfort with himself. Vivian Grant, who often drew strength from her confidence, now appeared as though her certainty had been gently peeled away. Her posture remained upright, but her eyes shifted between Maya and the window, as if her thoughts were struggling to find balance. She was no longer simply resistant. She was quiet in a way she had not been all morning. The ground staff member stood a little farther back now, watching with a softened expression. He understood more fully now why the moment mattered. His presence felt respectful, as though he had stepped into a lesson he had not expected to witness today. Maya finally lifted her gaze toward the captain. "Captain Briggs," she said gently, "I want you to proceed with the flight, but I also want to ensure that everyone here moves forward with understanding, not fear." Briggs nodded, his voice low. "You have my respect," he said, "and you have my apology." Maya nodded once in return. Lauren stepped slightly closer, her voice gentle but clear. "We can prepare for departure soon," she said, "but if you wish to address anything else before we continue, this might be the right moment." Briggs looked at her, then at Maya, his breath steadying as though he was finding the courage to speak with new intention. "There is something," he said quietly, "something I should have said earlier, before I let judgment guide me." Maya waited, her eyes patient. Briggs continued carefully. "Flying is more than a job for me. It has been my entire life. But sometimes the responsibility makes me cling too tightly to my own assumptions. I thought I was ensuring order. I did not see that I was creating harm." Maya listened, her expression softening. "You can only correct what you are willing to name," she replied. Briggs exhaled slowly, relief drifting through him like a quiet breeze. Vivian suddenly leaned forward, the movement small but filled with a kind of restless energy. "I want to understand something," she said, her voice lower than before. "Why did you stay so calm while we judged you? You had every reason to be angry. You had every right to confront us." Maya turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "For a long time," she said, "anger was the first thing I felt in moments like this. But anger takes away more than it returns. It steals peace. It robs clarity. And it gives power to the moment instead of giving power to the truth." Vivian listened with careful attention. Maya continued, "I stayed calm because I wanted you to see the truth without the noise. I wanted you to see me, not your reaction to me." Vivian swallowed, her voice trembling slightly. "I am not sure I deserve your kindness." Maya offered her a gentle smile. "Kindness is not a reward. It is a choice." Lauren felt her chest tighten with emotion. Maya's words had a way of reaching the quietest corners of the heart. Harold cleared his throat softly. "May I ask something?" he said. Maya turned her head toward him. "Of course. What did you feel?" he asked. "In the moment before you revealed the truth about the plane? What was happening inside you?" Maya took a slow breath, letting the question settle. "I felt tired," she said softly. "Not tired of the situation, tired of the pattern." Harold nodded slowly, his eyes lowering with recognition. Maya continued, "I felt a familiar ache, the ache that comes from being questioned before being known. The ache of carrying success and still being expected to prove you belong. Her voice softened even more, and I felt something else, a quiet hope. Harold looked up again, surprised. Hope, he repeated. Yes, Maya said. Hope that this moment might open a conversation that needed to happen. Lauren felt tears touch the backs of her eyes. She pressed her lips together to steady her breath. Captain Briggs shifted, taking in Maya's words as though they were a mirror he had not realized he needed. Vivian looked down at her hands, guilt moving across her expression like a shadow. The ground staff member stepped forward slightly. Miss Carter, he said gently, we will adjust departure time as needed. Please let us know how you wish to proceed. Maya nodded with a gentle assurance. We will depart shortly, she said. I simply want to make sure the cabin is settled. Briggs straightened, his voice calmer. I can take responsibility for the atmosphere moving forward, he said. Maya met his gaze. Responsibility is shared, she said, but leadership matters. Briggs nodded with gratitude, understanding the deeper layer of her words. Lauren stepped to Maya's side, her voice softer. Would you like water, or a moment alone? Maya shook her head. I want to stay here, with clarity. Lauren smiled gently. Vivian finally spoke, her voice quiet but sincere. Miss Carter, she said, I was wrong. I made assumptions based on nothing more than what I expected to see. You deserved better than that. Maya regarded her warmly. Thank you for saying that. Vivian hesitated, then added, I would like to be better than who I was when I walked onto this plane. Maya's smile deepened, soft and encouraging. That is the most important step anyone can take. Vivian nodded, her eyes softening. Harold placed a gentle hand on her back, offering quiet support. Captain Briggs turned toward the cabin door. I will notify the crew, he said. We will proceed when everyone is ready. He stepped away slowly, moving with a humility that softened the edges of the earlier conflict. Maya watched him leave, her expression thoughtful. She knew the moment was not fully resolved. There were more truths ahead, more choices to make, more layers to reveal. But something had shifted, something essential, something lasting. For the first time since boarding, Maya felt the room breathe with her instead of against her. The journey was far from over. But now, at least, the path forward was visible. The cabin began to settle again. Yet the atmosphere carried a new kind of weight. It was not tension anymore. It was reflection. A collective quietness shaped by the realization that everyone had just stepped into a moment larger than they first understood. Maya Carter remained seated, her posture unshaken, her breath steady. The reveal had passed, but its echo lingered in the room with a sense of quiet gravity. She gazed through the aircraft window, watching the soft rise of morning light spill across the tarmac. It brought a sense of calm to her chest, something grounding, something she had needed more than she would admit. Captain Daniel Briggs had stepped away to speak with the crew, and though he moved with purpose, he did so with a gentleness that was not present earlier. Each step carried the imprint of change, a recognition that leadership was not only found in command, but in humility. Lauren Fisher stayed near Maya's seat, her presence quiet and respectful. She did not hover. She did not intrude. She simply remained close enough to support if needed. Her expression was thoughtful, touched by a sense of gratitude that she did not fully know how to express. Harold Grant sat with his elbows resting on his knees, his fingers interlaced, his eyes cast downward in contemplation. He looked like a man replaying every word he had spoken that morning and questioning why he had spoken it that way at all. Vivian Grant leaned back in her seat, her gaze distant. The earlier rigidity in her posture had melted into something softer, though not entirely comfortable. She carried the look of someone confronting a truth about herself, one she had avoided for far too long. The ground staff member had quietly stepped out of the aircraft to give them space, but even his brief presence had left an impression. His respectful departure felt like a silent acknowledgement of the shift within the cabin. As the silence stretched, Lauren finally spoke, her voice gentle, almost like a whisper. "Maya, are you all right?" Maya turned slowly, her expression composed. "Yes," she said softly. "I am thinking." Lauren nodded. "I imagine a moment like that brings up a lot." Maya let her gaze drift back to the window for a moment before answering. "It does. It reminds me of how many times I had to stay calm when everything inside me wanted to shout. It reminds me of every boardroom where I was underestimated before I even spoke. Every meeting where I had to explain my own decisions. Every introduction where someone assumed I was the assistant, not the founder." Her voice lowered. "And it reminds me of how much strength it takes to stay still." Lauren's eyes softened. "You handle it with grace." Maya smiled faintly. "Grace is often the armor we wear when we have no shield." Vivian shifted in her seat, her fingers whirring at the seam of her sleeve. "I never understood," she said quietly, "what it felt like to be treated that way. Not truly." Maya turned to her with a calm curiosity. "What does it feel like now?" Vivian hesitated before answering. "Like I walked straight into a mirror," she said with a tremble in her voice. "And I did not like the reflection." Harold lifted his head, glancing at his wife. Vivian continued, her eyes fixed on Maya. "I judged you so quickly, so unfairly. And the truth is, I did it without thinking. That is what frightens me the most." Maya nodded slowly. "Awareness begins with discomfort. Discomfort is often the first doorway to change." Vivian's eyes glistened, though she blinked the emotion away. Harold spoke next, his voice quieter than before. "May I ask you something else?" he said to Maya. "You do not have to answer if it feels too personal." Maya inclined her head slightly. "Ask." Harold breathed in carefully. "When you built your company, when you became as successful as you are, was there a moment when you believed the bias would vanish?" Maya let a small, thoughtful pause settle between them before responding. "Yes," she said gently. "In the early years, I believed that success would erase the assumptions. I believed that wealth would change the way people saw me. I believed that accomplishment would soften the edges of prejudice." She looked toward the window again, watching the sunlight dance across the aircraft wing. "But the truth is, it does not disappear. It simply hides behind better manners, or deeper expectations, or more subtle questions." Lauren swallowed, her voice trembling when she asked, "Does it ever get easier?" Maya turned to her with an expression full of quiet honesty. "It gets familiar, and once it becomes familiar, you learn how to carry it without letting it crush you. But easier. Not always." Lauren looked down, absorbing the weight of those words. Vivian lifted her voice again, this time steadier. "I want to be honest," she said. "For a long time, I assumed that people who reached your level had everything handed to them. That success shielded them from struggle." Maya nodded. "That is a common assumption." Vivian met her gaze. "Then I saw the way you sat there, calm, patient, letting yourself be doubted without reacting. And I realized something. That kind of restraint is not privilege. It is survival." Maya did not respond immediately. Her eyes softened with a deep understanding. "You saw correctly," she said. Vivian lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry you have had to become so practiced." Maya breathed in, then let out a slow, steady sigh. "So am I." A moment of quiet passed. Then Captain Briggs returned to the cabin, his footsteps softer, more deliberate. "We are ready to resume preparations," he said gently. "But before we do, I want to speak as openly as I can." Maya faced him, her expression warm and attentive. Briggs looked at her, then at the other passengers. I have spent my entire career believing that fairness comes from enforcing rules as strictly as possible, he said. But today taught me something important. Rules do not matter if the assumptions behind them are flawed. In trying to create order, I allowed bias to guide me. His eyes softened toward Maya. I hope to carry this lesson forward, and I am grateful that you allowed space for it. Maya gave a small nod. Growth is never easy, but you stepped toward it. A quiet respect passed between them, genuine and unforced. Lauren gave a small smile of encouragement. Harold sighed, almost in a cleansing way, as though a tension he had carried all morning had finally released. Vivian looked up at Maya with eyes that held a fragile sincerity. The cabin no longer felt divided. It felt like a space where the truth had finally been allowed to breathe. Captain Briggs took a step back toward the cockpit door. We can begin pre-flight procedures. Please prepare for departure. He left with a sense of renewed purpose. Maya leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. Not from exhaustion, from release. Outside, the sunlight brightened across the tarmac. The engines began their low, steady hum, and the sky above stretched open as though inviting them forward. This journey was not only taking them across distance, it was carrying each person toward a different understanding of themselves, and they had only just begun. The engines of the Carter Airjet X-9 rumbled to life with a steady, confident vibration that flowed beneath the cabin floor. It was a sound that usually signaled routine, predictability, structure. But today, it carried something different. It carried the echo of everything that had just unfolded. Maya Carter kept her eyes closed for a long moment, simply listening. The low hum curled around her like a soft rhythm. In that quietness, she felt her breath aligning again, the way a string slowly steadies after a long pull. She opened her eyes eventually, her gaze drifting once more to the window. Light moved gently across the wing, smooth and warm. Lauren Fisher remained close, though she kept a respectful distance, her presence careful and supportive. She sensed Maya needed space, but she also knew the woman had carried too much alone for far too long. Some silences were not solitude. They were weight. Harold Grant sat back slowly, his shoulders sinking deeper into the leather. He looked as though he had aged a few years in a matter of minutes, not from frustration, but from realization. A realization that his worldview had been much smaller than he believed. Vivian Grant sat still, her hands resting quietly in her lap. The confident woman who had boarded the plane earlier seemed now wrapped in contemplation. Not guilt alone, not embarrassment alone. There was humility there, fragile and new, forming like delicate threads she was still learning how to hold. The aircraft cabin lighting softened into a gentle glow, reflecting quiet warmth against the polished surfaces. Yet even the light carried a sense of deeper meaning, as if the entire aircraft was adjusting itself to the emotional shift inside it. After a few moments, Lauren spoke with a softness meant not to disrupt. Maya, if you need anything at all, please tell me. Maya turned her head slightly, offering a small smile. I am all right, she said, just taking a moment to breathe. Lauren nodded, but her eyes lingered for a second, full of a respect that had grown steadily through the morning. Maya returned her attention toward the window. I always find peace right before takeoff, she murmured. It reminds me of the moment before growth. You feel the pull, the uncertainty, the trembling, but you know something stronger is coming. Lauren looked at her with admiration. You speak as if you have lived through many takeoffs. Maya gave a quiet laugh, warm but subtle. I have lived through many beginnings, she said, some gentle, some painful, but all leading somewhere I was meant to go. Vivian's voice rose gently. Are you always this calm? She asked softly. Even in moments like today. Maya considered the question carefully before answering. No, she said. Calm is not what I always feel. Calm is what I choose. Vivian looked down, absorbing that. Harold rubbed his palms together gently. then spoke. "Maya, do you mind if I ask something personal?" Maya faced him with patience. "You may," Harold breathed, slow and deliberate. "What was the moment that changed everything for you? The moment that made you who you are now?" Lauren glanced toward Maya with quiet curiosity. Even she had not heard the answer to this. Maya leaned back, her eyes drifting again toward the view outside. A distant plane crossed the sky, its form cutting through soft clouds. "There were many moments," she said, "but one shaped the rest." The cabin fell silent. "I was 24, she began, fresh out of business school, full of ideas, full of hope. I joined a company I admired deeply, believing my hard work would carve my path." Her voice softened. "But every room I entered, people looked past me, not because they disliked me, because they assumed I did not belong." Vivian flinched slightly. Harold listened, his chest tightening. "One day," Maya continued, "I presented a strategy proposal. I had spent weeks perfecting it. When I finished, the senior director looked at me and said he was surprised I could put together something so polished, not because of my experience, but because of who he believed I was." Lauren's eyes softened with a painful understanding. "That was the first time I realized," Maya said, her voice steady, "that brilliance does not erase bias. Accomplishment does not silence assumption, and excellence does not shield you from ignorance." She paused gently. "But it was also the moment that taught me something invaluable. I could either shrink to fit the expectations placed on me, or I could rise beyond them." Maya's eyes glowed with a quiet strength. "I chose to rise." Vivian took a shaky breath. "And people did not make that easy," Maya added softly. Harold nodded slowly. "I imagine not." Maya turned to him. "Success built from struggle tastes different. It stays with you. It teaches you how to stand even when the world tells you to sit. It teaches you how to speak even when people expect you to be silent." Her voice lowered. "And most importantly, it teaches you how to see. Really see. Because when you have been unseen for so long, you learn the value of seeing others." The cabin breathed quietly around her. Vivian lifted her gaze. "Is that why you handled us the way you did?" she asked. Maya nodded gently. "I did not want to respond with the same assumptions that were placed on me. I wanted to give the room a chance to find its truth." Lauren placed a hand over her heart, moved by Maya's sincerity. Harold leaned back again. "I feel ashamed," he said softly, "for how quickly I judged you." Maya met his eyes. "Shame is heavy," she said, "but reflection can turn it into something useful." Vivian let out a small, trembling exhale. "Useful how?" she asked. "By letting it guide you toward better choices," Maya said. "Shame only harms when you cling to it. Let it open your eyes instead." Vivian nodded slowly, her expression softening. The cabin door opened gently as Captain Daniel Briggs stepped back inside. His demeanor was calmer than before, touched by a humility that made his voice softer. "Pre-flight checks are underway," he announced. "We will depart in a few minutes." Maya acknowledged him with a nod. "Thank you, Captain." He hesitated, then spoke again. "I would like to assure you that from this moment forward, you will receive nothing short of respect." Maya smiled softly. "Respect should be the beginning," she said, "not the reward." Briggs pressed his lips together with a thoughtful nod. "You are right," he replied. "It will be." He stepped back toward the cockpit. Vivian watched him go, then turned slowly toward Maya. "Do you ever get tired of teaching people who should already know better?" Maya smiled again, this time with a tenderness that carried both resilience and weariness. "All the time," she said. "But growth does not happen by walking away from the conversation. Sometimes it happens by staying long enough for someone to see differently." Vivian's eyes shone with a softness that had not been there before. Harold rested a hand gently on his wife's back. Lauren stepped forward. "Maya," she said, "would you like anything before we take off?" Maya shook her head. "Just a smooth flight." Lauren smiled gently. "I will do what I can." The engines deepened their tone. The cabin lights shifted again. The aircraft prepared to move. Maya exhaled, her heart steady, her mind clear. The sky waited for them, and soon they would rise. The aircraft began to move, inching away from the gate with the slow, steady grace of something gathering courage. Outside the windows, the runway stretched long and quiet, bathed in pale morning light. The world felt still, as if pausing to witness what had unfolded inside the cabin. Maya Carter watched the scenery glide by, her breath calm, her gaze steady. There was a softness in her eyes now, a quiet acceptance that did not erase what had happened, but allowed it to settle in its rightful place. She felt the subtle shifts in the aircraft's movement, felt the weight of the engines humming beneath her feet, felt the room around her settling into a deeper understanding. Lauren Fisher adjusted a small detail on the cabin console, her motions precise, yet gentle. She looked toward Maya with a warmth that had grown over the morning, a warmth shaped not from admiration alone, but from respect. Real respect. The kind that comes when someone sees you with clarity, not expectation. Harold Grant shifted in his seat, leaning back with a slow exhale. The realization of his earlier behavior still lingered heavily in his expression, but something else had taken root there as well. A willingness to grow, to see more, to understand beyond assumption. Vivian Grant rested her fingertips against her armrest, her eyes fixed on the aisle floor as if trying to gather her thoughts one careful thread at a time. It was clear she was no longer fighting the truth. She was sitting with it, letting it fold itself gently into her awareness. The faint chime of the captain's signal echoed through the cabin, and moments later, Captain Daniel Briggs stepped out briefly from the cockpit. His presence was different now. There was no tension in his shoulders, no defensiveness in his stance. His gaze sought Maya with sincerity. "We will begin our takeoff roll shortly," he said. "I wanted to thank you again for your patience." Maya nodded. "Thank you, Captain. I trust the journey will be handled with care." Briggs' expression softened with gratitude. He returned to the cockpit, leaving a quiet sense of calm behind him. The aircraft gathered speed as it turned onto the main runway. A slow vibration rippled beneath the cabin floor, the kind that always comes just before the ascent. Maya felt it resonate through her chest. She had felt this sensation hundreds of times, yet today it carried a deeper meaning. Lauren approached her with a gentle voice. "Takeoff will be smooth," she said. "Just relax and breathe." Maya offered a small smile. "I always breathe a little deeper just before the plane lifts," she replied. "It reminds me that rising requires both surrender and strength." Lauren nodded, touched by the thought. The engines roared softly, power building with purpose. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the vibrations merge with her breath. She remembered something her grandmother once told her when she was a child. When you feel the world pushing against you, push back by rising. Those words returned now, steady and warm. As the engines surged, the plane accelerated. The force pressed gently against everyone's backs, holding them in place as the wheels gathered momentum. Outside, the ground sped beneath the windows in long, blurred streaks of color. Vivian's fingers tightened around her armrest again, though this time it was not from fear. It was from reflection, from the sense that she was leaving behind the version of herself that had stepped onto the plane hours earlier. Harold glanced toward his wife, placing a reassuring hand on her knee. "We are taking off," he whispered. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft but steady. In more ways than one. The aircraft's nose lifted. The earth began to fall away. The cabin rose into the embrace of open sky. A soft gasp escaped Vivian as the plane ascended smoothly, the sky widening around them like a slow, unfolding canvas. Harold leaned back with a deeper breath, letting the sensation wash over him. Lauren steadied herself near the galley, her expression serene. She loved this moment. The moment when the plane left the ground and everything seemed possible. Maya felt her heart settle into a gentle rhythm. The sky greeted her like an old friend, offering peace she had always found among clouds. As the aircraft climbed, layers of white mist swept past the windows, soft like breath. When they broke through the last veil of cloud, sunlight flooded the cabin with golden warmth. It felt like the sky was acknowledging everything she had endured. After a long, quiet moment, Vivian spoke again. "Maya," she said softly. Maya turned to her. "Yes." Vivian hesitated, her voice trembling with sincerity. "What do you hope people see when they look at you?" Maya considered the question carefully. "I hope they see a person first," she said. "Not an assumption, not a category, not a story they created before I walked into the room." Vivian nodded slowly. "And beyond that," Maya added, her voice deepening, "I hope they see my work, my integrity, my compassion, not the challenges that shaped me, but the strength that carried me through them." Vivian's eyes shimmered with a quiet realization. "That is not what I saw at first," she whispered. Maya smiled gently. "Now you do." Harold spoke next, his tone reflective. "You know, I have spent most of my life assuming I understand people before they speak. Today showed me how dangerous that habit is." Maya faced him with understanding. "Awareness is the first step," she said. "Awareness leads to change, and change leads to better choices." Harold nodded. "I want to make better choices," he said sincerely. "We all do," Vivian added softly. Lauren approached quietly. "Maya," she said, "I need to complete a few checks, but I will return shortly." Maya nodded. "Thank you. Lauren." Lauren stepped away, her movements gentle, leaving Maya to her thoughts once again. The sky stretched out endlessly outside the windows, a vast expanse of soft blue that seemed to cradle the aircraft rather than simply carry it. The light shifted across the cabin, softening every line, every surface, every face. Maya breathed deeply, letting the moment wrap around her. She felt the sting of earlier pain still lingering, but it no longer dominated her chest. Growth had stepped into its place. Vivian finally broke the quiet again. "May I ask one more thing?" she said. Maya nodded. "Of course. When the captain questioned you," Vivian said carefully, "when we questioned you, did you ever think of telling us the truth immediately?" Maya took a slow breath. "A small part of me wanted to," she admitted. "Not to defend myself, but to end the injustice quickly. But another part of me needed the moment to unfold." Harold frowned slightly. "Why?" Maya turned her gaze back to the window. "Because if I had revealed the truth immediately, you would have respected my ownership, not me." Vivian's breath trembled. "And I needed you to see me." She said the final words with quiet softness, but they landed with incredible weight. Harold lowered his head. Vivian breathed deeply. Lauren approached again, her steps soft. "Maya," she said, "we will level off soon." Maya nodded. "Thank you." The aircraft stabilized moments later, gliding smoothly through the open sky. The world below drifted away, leaving only peace above the clouds. Maya felt something inside her loosen, not entirely healed, but opening. She could feel the entire cabin breathing with her, finally in the same rhythm. The ascent had not only lifted the aircraft, it had lifted the people inside it, and the sky, vast and forgiving, carried them onward. The Carter Airjet X-9 floated smoothly above the clouds, wrapped in a quiet that felt almost sacred. The engines murmured with a steady rhythm, a kind of heartbeat beneath the cabin floor, and the sky outside stretched wide in gentle shades of blue and gold. soft enough to calm even the heaviest thoughts. Maya Carter leaned slightly toward the window. The sunlight along the wing made the metal shimmer like a calm river. She watched the horizon slowly expand, felt the way the atmosphere held the aircraft with silent strength. There was a subtle comfort in the stillness up here, a comfort she had turned to many times in her life, a place where the world below felt distant enough for her to breathe without weight. Lauren Fisher moved quietly through the cabin, checking small details with focused care. But every so often, her eyes drifted toward Maya, as if wanting to ensure she remained at ease. There was a softness in Lauren's movements now, one shaped by everything she had witnessed. Harold Grant sat with his hands folded lightly in his lap, his posture more relaxed than before. He looked toward Maya occasionally, as though trying to understand her with new eyes. His expression carried sincerity, even humility, something that had been missing when the journey began. Vivian Grant kept her gaze lowered at first, but the longer she sat, the more her eyes lifted toward Maya with a fragile curiosity. She no longer seemed defensive or uneasy. Instead, she looked like someone standing at the edge of a conversation she needed to have with herself, a conversation she had avoided her entire life. The aircraft leveled off smoothly, and the gentle ding from the cockpit signaled their cruising altitude. Captain Daniel Briggs spoke over the speaker system with a voice that carried an unfamiliar warmth. "We are now flying at 37,000 feet. Thank you for your patience. Please continue to enjoy a calm flight." His tone held gratitude rather than formality, sincerity rather than distance. As the announcement faded, silence returned, soft and introspective. A few minutes passed before Vivian finally spoke, her voice quiet and trembling. "Maya," she said gently, "may I ask you something?" Maya turned with a calm, attentive expression. "You may." Vivian hesitated as though searching for the right words. Her fingers intertwined, unclasped, then intertwined again. "I keep thinking about what you said earlier," she said, "about wanting people to see you, really see you. And I realize I have rarely looked at anyone without my own preconceptions getting in the way." Maya studied her thoughtfully. "Most people struggle with that," she replied, "but awareness is the beginning." Vivian nodded. "I want to do better," she whispered, "not just in this moment, but beyond it." Maya's eyes warmed. That desire is already a step toward change. Harold leaned in slightly, his voice low. "Maya, do you ever become tired of these conversations?" he asked. "Tired of explaining your existence to people who should already understand?" Maya let her gaze drift toward the ceiling for a moment before answering. "Tired," she said softly, "is too small a word. I have spent years navigating spaces where I was seen as the unfamiliar presence, the unexpected figure, the person whose capability needed confirmation. It drains you in ways that linger even after success arrives." Harold nodded, swallowing heavily. "I imagine it must feel lonely," he said. Maya looked at him with a mixture of honesty and grace. "It can be," she said. "There were days when the world felt like a closed room, and I was knocking at a door no one wanted to open. But every time I faced resistance, I reminded myself of the people who came before me, people who fought so I could walk, people who walked so I could run." Her expression deepened with quiet emotion. "And I run so that someone after me can fly without asking permission." Vivian breathed in slowly. Her eyes shimmered with a soft ache. "Maya," she said, "you carry something stronger than I have ever seen." Maya shook her head gently. "I carry what life gave me, and I try to use it well." Lauren moved a step closer. "Oh, speaking with gentle admiration." "You use it beautifully," she said. "I have learned so much from watching you today." Maya smiled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lauren." The cabin fell into another thoughtful silence. The aircraft glided through a stretch of open sky, the sun painting the clouds in soft strokes of light. Vivian cleared her throat softly. "There is something else I want to ask," she said. "If you are willing." "I am listening," Maya replied. Vivian took a careful breath. "When you revealed you owned the plane, everything inside me shifted. But before that moment, I felt anger. Not toward you, toward myself, because I realized how quickly I questioned you, and I hated seeing that in myself." Her voice trembled. "How do you face that feeling without letting it consume you?" Maya leaned slightly forward, her voice warm and steady. "By understanding that self-reflection is not punishment," she said, "it is a gift. You discovered something important about yourself today, and you can choose what to do with that knowledge." Vivian swallowed hard. "And what would you do?" she asked, her voice soft. "If you were in my place?" Maya breathed gently, letting the question settle. "I would forgive myself first," she said, "because growth cannot take root in shame. Then I would listen and learn and choose differently next time." Vivian closed her eyes briefly, releasing a quiet breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." Harold placed a gentle hand on his wife's back. "You are trying," he said. "That matters." Maya nodded toward him. "It matters greatly." Lauren stood beside them, her voice filled with sincerity. "You know, I have flown thousands of hours," she said, "and I have seen many conflicts on planes, but I have never witnessed one turn into something this meaningful." Maya gave her a kind smile. "Sometimes the sky brings out truths the ground hides." Lauren's eyes brightened. "That feels true," she said softly. Maya gazed toward the clouds again. "I believe that when a moment tests us, it is not meant to break us. It is meant to reveal us." Vivian looked up at her, touched by the words. "And I am grateful," Vivian said, "that you revealed something different in me." Maya offered a gentle smile. "We revealed something in each other." The engine hum deepened slightly as the aircraft adjusted course. The sunlight drifted across Maya's face, illuminating her features with a warm, serene glow. Captain Briggs's voice sounded briefly over the intercom. "We will be cruising for the next hour. Weather ahead is clear. Should you need anything, please notify the cabin crew." His words floated through the cabin with a sense of steadiness that had not been present earlier in the day. Maya felt the echo of resolve in his tone, and she felt something healing in her chest, not fully, but beginning. She turned to Vivian and Harold again. "You both stepped into a difficult truth today," she said gently. "That is not easy. It requires courage." Vivian let out a trembling breath. "Courage is not something I have always had," she admitted. Maya shook her head softly. "You showed courage by staying in the conversation." Vivian's eyes welled with quiet gratitude. Lauren approached with a soft smile. "Maya, would you like water now?" she asked. "Or tea?" Maya nodded. "Tea would be lovely." Lauren left with a warm nod. Vivian watched her go, then looked back at Maya with a thoughtful expression. "You know," Vivian said, "I thought I understood what strength looked like. But today showed me a different kind, a quieter kind, a deeper kind." Maya smiled gently. "Strength is not always loud," she said. "Sometimes it is the quiet refusal to break." Vivian breathed deeply. "And you do not break." Maya's eyes softened. "I bend," she said quietly. "I bend often. But bending is how we learn to withstand the wind." Harold nodded slowly, deeply moved. The sky outside shimmered with light. The plane carried them forward. And in the quiet above the earth, each person began to see themselves differently. The air held their reflection, and the journey continued. The sky remained steady around the Carter Airjet X-9, a wide expanse of blue that seemed to hold the aircraft as gently as an open hand. Sunlight drifted across the cabin in soft ribbons, warming the seats and glinting along the edges of the windows. Everything felt calm now, not quiet from hesitation or discomfort, but quiet from understanding, from growth, from the kind of peace that arrives only after a storm has been acknowledged rather than ignored. Maya Carter sat with her shoulders eased and her breath slow. She looked out at the soft clouds below and allowed herself a rare moment of stillness, a moment where nothing demanded her strength, a moment where she could simply exist. Lauren Fisher approached her with a cup of warm tea, the aroma gentle and soothing. "I added a touch of honey," Lauren said softly. "You mentioned earlier that you prefer it that way." Maya accepted the cup with a grateful nod. "Thank you, Lauren. You have been thoughtful at every turn." Lauren smiled, though her voice carried a depth of sincerity. "You taught me something today," she said. "Something about seeing people with more intention." Maya warmed at the words. "That means a great deal." Lauren moved back toward the galley as Harold Grant shifted in his seat. He looked toward Maya with careful consideration, still processing everything that had happened, but no longer weighed down by shame. Rather, he carried a sense of resolve. "Maya," he said slowly, "do you mind if I ask something about your company? Only if you are comfortable." Maya turned with a calm expression. "What would you like to know?" Harold hesitated. "What compelled you," he said, "to build something so large, so impactful? I imagine the road was not smooth." Maya breathed gently, letting the question settle within her. "The road was anything but smooth," she said. "But I did not build my company because the path was easy. I built it because it mattered." Harold nodded, listening intently. "I wanted to create opportunities," Maya continued, "not just for myself, but for people who look like me, people who are often overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. I wanted to carve out a space where brilliance could thrive without first having to justify its right to exist." Vivian's breath trembled softly as she listened. That takes extraordinary courage," she whispered. Maya smiled gently. "It takes community, vision, and persistence born from necessity." Vivian lowered her eyes. "Necessity," she repeated quietly, as though tasting the weight of the word. "I never realized how different our journeys could be." Maya looked at her with a softness that held no judgment. "Different journeys do not make one person's experience more valid than another," she said, "but acknowledging the difference helps us understand each other better." Vivian nodded slowly. "Thank you," she murmured, "for your patience today." Maya sipped her tea with a thoughtful expression. "Gratitude is mutual," she replied. "You allowed space for the truth to change you." For a while, no one spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence, steady and reassuring. The plane soared smoothly through the open sky, a symbolic reminder that rising above old fears and assumptions was always possible. Eventually, Captain Daniel Briggs stepped out of the cockpit again. His face carried a humility far removed from the rigid professionalism he had shown earlier. He approached Maya with the quiet respect of someone seeking forgiveness. "Miss Carter," he said, clearing his throat gently, "I wanted to say something before we begin our descent." Maya met his gaze calmly. "What is on your mind?" "Captain." Briggs took a careful breath. "I misjudged you," he said. "I let my assumptions guide my actions instead of my training and my humanity. That will not happen again." Maya studied him for a moment. There was a sincerity in his posture that could not be faked, a willingness to learn. "Growth," she said softly, "is the flight we choose to take. I am glad you chose it today." Briggs lowered his head slightly in gratitude. "Your grace has been remarkable," he said, "and I hope to be a better pilot and a better person because of this moment." He returned to the cockpit with a lighter step. Vivian released a breath she had been holding. "Maya," she said, "how do you stay so composed? I would have felt angry, hurt, maybe even vengeful." Maya considered her words carefully. "I feel all of those things," she said. "Anger, hurt, frustration, but I do not let them guide my actions." If I responded to every slight with retaliation, I would never have the energy to build anything meaningful. Vivian's eyes softened. So you choose purpose over pain, she said. Maya nodded. Every time. The aircraft glided smoothly through a patch of thin clouds. The light in the cabin dimmed slightly, then brightened again as they emerged into open sky. It felt almost symbolic, a brief shadow, then warmth, growing, just as each person on board had grown. Lauren returned, holding a small cloth to polish the nearby surface, but she paused and turned to Maya. "There is something I want to tell you," she said with quiet intensity. "When you first stepped aboard, I did not know who you were, but I sensed something strong in you even then, something steady, something grounded." Maya smiled warmly. "That is kind of you to say." Lauren continued, "But I want you to know that even if you had not been the owner of this plane, even if you had been anyone else, you deserved respect simply for being here." Maya nodded gently. "That truth is what guides me," she said, "and I am grateful you speak it now." A moment passed, soft and warm. The intercom chimed again. "This is Captain Briggs. We will begin our descent shortly. Please prepare for landing." Maya placed her empty cup aside and sat back. The shift of the engine signaled the beginning of the slow return to Earth. The ground would soon rise to meet them. The journey was almost complete. Vivian straightened her posture. "Maya," she said softly, "I hope that, if our paths ever cross again, I will meet you with the respect you deserved from the start." Maya reached out, gently touching Vivian's hand in a gesture of understanding. "We are crossing paths right now," she said, "and you are meeting me exactly as you should." Vivian's eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered. Harold placed a hand over his wife's. "This flight changed us," he said softly. "More than a trip. It was a lesson." Maya's expression warmed with gratitude. "Lessons that change us," she replied, "are the ones we carry into the world." The aircraft lowered through layers of white cloud. Outside, glimpses of land appeared through thin openings in the mist, roads, buildings, rivers, a reminder that life would continue once the plane touched down. But the people on this journey would walk into that life differently. Lauren secured the last items and took her seat. She looked toward Maya with a soft, encouraging smile. The plane descended gracefully, the city below becoming clearer. The runway approached. The wheels neared the earth. And then, a gentle touch, a smooth landing. Lauren let out a quiet breath of relief. Vivian closed her eyes for a moment. Harold released the tension from his shoulders. The cabin seemed to hold a soft glow, not from the light, but from the shared understanding among its passengers. Maya exhaled slowly. She had walked aboard this flight unseen. She would walk off fully recognized. Captain Briggs' voice returned. "Welcome to our destination. It has been an honor to carry you. We wish you all a meaningful day ahead." As the plane taxied toward the private terminal, Maya felt a warmth settle in her chest. Not triumph, not validation, but hope. Hope that this moment would ripple outward. Hope that understanding would multiply. Hope that change, once awakened, would not fade. Vivian took Maya's hand gently. "Thank you for giving us the chance to grow," she said. Maya smiled, her voice deep and sincere. "Growth is a gift we give ourselves." I only held up the mirror. The aircraft came to a stop. The world waited outside the door, and every person on board carried a new truth with them. The journey had ended. The transformation had just begun. The story of a woman of color who was asked to change seats on her own plane is not just a story about prejudice. It is also a gentle but powerful reminder that sometimes it is not the harsh actions that hurt us, but the invisible judgments. The moments when we are looked at with suspicion, or pushed aside because others believe we are not worthy. But Maya Carter's calmness shows us something important. True strength lies not in responding with anger, but in maintaining dignity even when misunderstood. As we grow up, we all experience moments when we are overlooked, misjudged, or treated unfairly. And how we choose to respond will determine who we become. This story also reminds us of a mirror sometimes. People don't need to be taught. They just need to see themselves in their actions. And when the truth is revealed, people have the opportunity to grow. Hopefully, each of us, no matter what age, can keep a little lightness in our hearts to face the imperfections of life. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If the story touches you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to bring meaningful and emotional content. Your companionship is the greatest source of motivation for us to continue telling healing stories.